sanctions on the Biden and Harris administration due to Israel.
Keeping you informed and engaged, now more than ever. This is Sekulow. We want to hear from you. Share and post your comments or call 1-800-684-3110. And now your host, Logan Sekulow.
Welcome to Sekulow for this Monday. Will Haynes is joining me in studio as well, and Jeff Balaban from ACLJ Jerusalem will be joining us a bit later. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the news in relation to Israel, but we also wanted to start this broadcast thinking about, talking about, and actually taking some response here to what's going on in our home state of Tennessee, and also a neighboring area, an area we grew up in western North Carolina. So obviously you've all seen the hurricane damage, the unprecedented damage that's happened to that area of the country, and we wanted to make sure the ACLJ responded as well. So with that, a portion of all donations that are made today on aclj.org will be going to relief efforts in different organizations in western North Carolina and in East Tennessee. So we want to make sure that off the top we let you know that you can support the hurricane relief effort right now by supporting the ACLJ. Again, unprecedented tragedy, and we desperately wanted to help. It's hit very close to home for a lot of us. So please join us with your support right now at aclj.org. You can go to aclj.org/relief if you want to go directly, or scan the QR code. We're working with the governor's office here in Tennessee to make sure those funds go to the right places, and we make sure that we take care of our own as much as we can. That does still bring us to what's going on over the weekend in terms of the war in Israel. As we know, the top leaders of Hezbollah, multiple top leaders, it felt like it kept coming in, were taken out, Will, and I'm sure everyone saw, but maybe we can give them just a brief update.
That's right. Pretty much the entire leadership structure, especially when it pertains to the missile and rockets force, which is the force of Hezbollah that is the strongest and also constantly targeting Israel to the south. Every single member of leadership has been eliminated, and that comes with the taking out of Nasrallah, who was for more than 30 years the leader, the Secretary General, as he was referred to, of Hezbollah, one of the largest non-state militias in the world, responsible for countless American soldiers' deaths, as well as those around the region. He was taken out in an airstrike in Beirut on Friday. We actually got reports of that airstrike while we were on air on Friday, and we're hoping that they were a successful targeting of Nasrallah. He has been an elusive figure for 30 years, being able to dodge assassination attempts and being taken out, being able to maintain his grip on Hezbollah and really on the country of Lebanon. While they're not the government of Lebanon, they are an extremely powerful force within that country and pretty much dominate the entire south of Lebanon on the border with Israel. He was successfully taken out by Israel as they continue to escalate their campaign against the terror leadership, whether it be Iran, Hamas, or Hezbollah, as we saw on Friday.
All right, and this is the start just this week of the High Holy Days, for the Jewish people and for the Israeli people, including Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year, which I believe begins in just about 2 days on October 2nd. So, and of course, we're going to be at the 1 year of the vicious attacks by Hamas. So all of this is happening at the same time. We want your support, but we also want you to give us your thoughts. 1-800-684-3110. What do you think about Israel's continued fight? Because we also know, we'll tease this out and talk about it in the next segment, the squad is not too happy about this. I know that it doesn't seem like it should be shocking anymore, but every time it is. And it's shocking when the New York Times comes out and starts calling leaders of terrorist organizations as, creative leaders or whatever the words are that they used. And of course, that always seems to happen in these moments. How do you feel about the response? And you're going to hear the response from Rashida Tlaib coming up in the next segment. You're not going to want to miss it. Phone lines are open at 1-800-684-3110. And again, as all of us here at the ACLJ, our hearts have been broken watching the news of what's going on right now. I'm watching it right now in North Carolina and our home state of Tennessee. Support those relief efforts. A percentage of all donations that come in today to the ACLJ will go to relief efforts in those areas. So right now, aclj.org to join us with your support. We'll be right back.
We start with the ongoing tensions in the Middle East, 24 hours since the announcement of the death of the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. Fears remain that Nasrallah's killing could spark an all-out regional war. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu described the attack as an historic turning point.
How does this affect the ability of this militant group to respond?
What we're witnessing is the most stunning Israeli military success since the 1967 Six-Day War. They have flipped the script entirely on Hezbollah in a matter of days. And Hezbollah is reeling, as we've seen now for the past 10 plus days, from the pager attacks, which decimated their internal communications, to now devastating assassination of Hassan Nasrallah and his top lieutenants. Hezbollah right now is lost in the wilderness, and Israel is taking advantage.
Here, soldiers in northern Israel look poised to expand an offensive against the region's biggest paramilitary force, Hezbollah, in Lebanon. They've already killed its leader and devastated its ranks, while also striking Hamas in Gaza.
Our enemies and our friends return to see Israel as it is, a strong, determined, powerful country. But I tell you, citizens of Israel, these are also challenging days. Because even in these days, we should not forget that we are in the midst of a difficult war, the cost of which are heavy.
If Israel was to go in to southern Lebanon as well, what would it do? Its aim would be to push Hezbollah away from the border, to make it keep to the UN Security Council resolution that ended the 2006 war. That means making sure that Hezbollah is to the north of the Litani River. So would Israel go and try to occupy that big area in the south of Lebanon up to the river, or would it go for a smaller scale operation closer to the border?
Welcome back to Sekulow. Again, we are taking your phone calls at 1-800-684-3110. As we said earlier, all support today, a percentage of all support that comes in through aclj.org or aclj.org/relief, or you can scan the QR code, will be going to hurricane relief. Currently, in North Carolina, the devastation is just horrendous. We have been directly involved, and in East Tennessee, obviously our home state, so we are in contact with the governor's office here in Tennessee to make sure that those funds go to the right places. Again, if you support the ACLJ today, which a lot of you have, a portion of that is going to go to relief campaigns there. I did want to move on and continue this conversation about Israel and their attacks on Hezbollah and their attacks on Hamas, obviously taking out really the top leadership in Hezbollah over the weekend. But of course, our own officials couldn't waste a moment to not, of course, were they celebrating? We took out 30-year terrorist? No, of course, they're putting out statements like this. And this is from Rashida Tlaib. It says, the Biden-Harris administration continues to allow Netanyahu and the Israeli government to operate with impunity as they carry out war crimes. After facing no red line in Gaza in an attempt to remain in power, Netanyahu is now expanding his genocidal campaign to Lebanon, using the same tactics the Biden-Harris administration has endorsed. We've already seen indiscriminate acts on civilian infrastructure. We've seen Israel officials falsely declare that Lebanon isn't a state and that Israel has a right to invade and occupy it. The U.S. weapons being used to kill innocent civilians in Gaza have already claimed the lives of over 500 people in Lebanon, including over 50 children, thousands more civilians. It goes on to say President Biden must implement an immediate arms embargo to end the slaughter and de-escalate the risk of a wider regional war. That, again, is coming from one of our own elected officials.
That's right. Rashida Tlaib, the congresswoman from Michigan, is now deciding that this is the time to really stand up for the terrorist organizations, as we've seen terrible language from them ever since really a couple weeks after October 7th, whenever Israel started to respond to that horrendous attack that was conducted against the Israeli people. Now, when you hear something like that at a time also when you're just, days away really from an election, we're just almost at a month. We'll be at a month in just a few days from the general election, knowing the problems that Joe Biden had with the community in Michigan that is represented by Congresswoman Tlaib. You have to wonder what pushback she's getting within her own community right now to put statements out like this. You'd think that something that hypercritical of an administration would not be stated at this exact time. Basically claiming that the current sitting vice president and president of the United States, their policies are furthering genocide. With almost a month to go from a general election, you'd think that maybe you'd phrase it a little bit less harsh against the sitting administration of your party. But no, she's going there. She's calling for an immediate arms embargo. You wonder also what kind of communications they're giving to the Harris campaign, and if we will see, as Kamala Harris has tended to do in this general election campaign that she's run for just a few months now, if she'll come up with a new policy or strategy to try to appease a certain voting group, this one being the representative, the area of Michigan represented by Rashida Tlaib.
Right, exactly. So she's talking to her own people here. But of course, if you don't support Israel at all, which they do not, if they have no feelings or support of them being able to defend themselves, of course they're not going to like the most recent actions, which really doesn't escalate. Of course it's escalating. But it's escalating to the point of now, I'd say a point of no return. You have your head of Hezbollah being taken out. You have Hamas very weak. This is time for Benjamin Netanyahu's Israeli government to probably finish the job, to go in there and take care of what they've needed to take care of for decades. I think he believes he is the person to do it. Their administration is the one to do it. And look, I'm not saying it's not even controversial in Israel. There's some people in Israel who have problems with this. There's just as many. It's like the same as here. It's like half and half, liberals and conservatives. But a lot of them do believe in fighting for their own country. Because even we could see in the New York Times, it was the obituary, I guess you'd say, for the head of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, they put on there a statement that talked about how, he was actually a pretty, though he was pretty conservative in his views, he did seek for a peaceful country where all people could live together. Of course, that country could not involve the state of Israel.
That's right. This is from the headline, "Protesters Mourn Nasrallah's Death Around the World." Meanwhile, I'm seeing celebrations around the world at Nasrallah's death.
Maybe one of the most uplifting moments was after he was even presumed dead, before they even had confirmed it. There was uprisings in the streets in Syria, in Lebanon, in America, in UK, in front of the Israeli, in Canada, in front of the embassies, thanking Israel for doing this because they've been under extreme rule for decades.
And this is from that third paragraph of that article, "Protesters Mourn Nasrallah's Death Around the World." Over his 32 years leading the organization and with the support of Iran, he built Hezbollah into a domestic political force and one of the most heavily armed non-state forces in the world. Mr. Nasrallah was opposed to Israel, which he called the Zionist entity, and maintained that there should be one Palestine with equality for Muslims, Jews, and Christians. A powerful orator, he was beloved among many Shiite Muslims and historically marginalized group in the Arab world, and created a state within a state in Lebanon that provided social services. What a great guy, according to the New York Times.
I don't understand why we're doing this. I don't understand why every time a terrorist leader is taken out or a dictator is taken out, there's this weird apology from, it feels like, the mainstream press, whether that's the AP, whether that is the New York Times. It happens over and over again to a point where you do start looking towards, I'm glad we exist, I'm glad other broadcasts exist, because that wasn't even the mainstream view of this, as you said, Will. The mainstream view of this was the world is lucky to be rid of him. The President Biden, put out a statement essentially saying that. Of course, they don't say thank you to Israel, but they do say, he was a horrible guy who murdered endless amounts of people, of his own people, that even people of the Muslim faith disagreed with because of the way that they're sectioned, that certain Muslims were not even, they were even celebrating this moment. This wasn't just a moment for Christians and Jews to be excited. This is a moment their own people felt liberated. But of course, our own press, our own New York Times, has to go out there and start making these kind of statements. It's really sad. You do start looking for alternative media sources. I know there's the New York Sun that's existing right now. I start reading a lot of their content because you want to see other places that hopefully are providing similar style content, but actually from a point of view of truth. Let's go ahead and go to Tori, who's calling on line 2 in Texas. And I encourage you all to call in at 1-800-684-3110. Tori, go ahead.
Yes, I'd just like to say that I completely and totally back Israel, everything they're doing They've been fighting since they've been a country. They've been fighting since God brought them into Israel. So if people would pick up their Bible, read it cover to cover, they would understand how much importance Israel holds to the entire world.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they would back Israel.
Tori, absolutely. Sadly, I think even amongst the church, that hasn't become the mainstream view anymore. There's been a very big separation of what is modern Israel, what is biblical Israel, what's the difference, why do we need to support Israel, why do we not need to support Israel? Sadly, Tori, I think there's some really warped points of view that are happening right now. That's why we provide this kind of content. We talk about this important, because I do believe, if you've ever visited or anyone's ever visited, is the biblical homeland of our faith, of the Christian faith, of the Jewish faith, and even of the Muslim faith. It has significance for the three major Abrahamic religions. But when you are there and you feel it and you experience it, it's also the homeland to the Jewish people, and they are surrounded by countries that don't want them to exist. So you push them over the edge a year ago. You push them over the edge when all of a sudden 2,000-ish people are murdered at a music festival. And what happens now is the gloves came off, and now Israel, who has probably the most strategic military force in the world, as we saw those pager attacks, where thousands of people were injured. They were all Hezbollah actors. Of course, there's always going to be, sadly, in war, there's going to be civilians who get in the way. And that is an unfortunate truth. I hate it. No one wants that. No one wants war. Israel does not want war. You may feel like they do from the news, but they do not. What they want is peace for their own country. And they've been fighting for it, as Tori said, since the times of the Bible, and they've certainly been fighting for it over the last 65 years. It is just a sad place to be in when we don't feel like we even have that support here in America. When these should be moments of, you don't want to rejoice over someone's death, but you do want to celebrate when evil is being thwarted from areas. And you see it when you see their own people on the streets celebrating. But then our elected officials in America and our leadership is not. They're saying, how dare they? Look to the people who are actually affected, to those that were under these dictatorships. They were under the rule of someone who was bringing extreme laws that really impacted and hurt thousands and thousands and thousands of people, the opposite of freedom. Phone lines are open for your calls, 1-800-684-3110. Again, if you support the work of the ACLJ today at aclj.org, a portion of all the proceeds that come in today will be going to support hurricane relief. We're working with the state of Tennessee and some organizations in North Carolina. So go to aclj.org or scan that QR code right now.
The devastation from Helene spread across the South.
Yes, North Carolina was hit with flooding it hasn't seen in a century, some calling it biblical. This is the scene in Asheville, which is now isolated after roads leading into the town flooded and cell towers were knocked down in the storm.
Well, you can see the aftermath now, which is just mud crusted everywhere, from the streets, sidewalks to the plants in front of me. Even further down this street, which is blocked off from police, you could see on the buildings just how high the water level came. I spoke to one jewelry shop owner yesterday, and she says they couldn't get their door open, but when they looked inside their window, they could see all of their jewelry, all of their shelves, even up to the stairs, completely smothered in mud.
This is not just Asheville. This is North Carolina, western North Carolina, a huge area that spans probably about 11,750 square miles at this point. Millions of people. That's an area the size of Massachusetts, its surrounding states like Tennessee and Atlanta.
The historic storm dumping as much as 30 inches of rain in parts of the Carolina mountains. Nearly a dozen landslides reported.
I don't think anyone was prepared for it. I don't think anyone thought it would be this bad.
Roads and bridges washed away. As of Saturday, the state DOT shutting down more than 400 roads. Countless residents stranded. Crews and neighbors going door to door to help the most vulnerable.
It's like a bomb went off. They don't have homes. They don't have oxygen, they don't have water.
This is an unprecedented tragedy that requires an unprecedented response.
In Asheville, many residents growing desperate. Cell service and potable water out for days.
This is apocalyptic, not just for Canton, but the entire region.
Now, most of this area is still in a state of emergency. We do know that as of right now, the county says about 1,000 people are still unaccounted for, and they're still doing life-saving missions every single day, even days after Helene has passed on.
Back to Sekulow. Again, you can support hurricane relief by supporting the ACLJ today. A portion of all funds that come in today will go to organizations in the state of Tennessee and North Carolina that are providing relief efforts. So do that at aclj.org. We want to make sure that we're giving back as well, that we're not just talking about some of these things, that we are supporting wherever we can. And we do that with our work in all the topics. We're working right now this big counter campaign for life in Massachusetts. We're not just talking about it. We're going actually to do it. We're going to support hurricane relief in North Carolina and our home state of Tennessee. You're going to hear all the stuff we're doing in Israel, because we're going to talk to the head of ACLJ Jerusalem later on in the broadcast. But I want to get your thoughts. As we've seen, some of the polling will indicate that Harris may be down in some of these states where a more you'd say a pro-Hamas, anti-Israel sentiment is stronger. And we have seen some pretty strong statements in support of Israel from Vice President Harris, even if they are missing some key words, and we can kind of go through those. And of course, they're always missing some, trying to play to both sides. But when you know that you're down potentially in some of these states, we may see a swing. Do you think, as one of our callers here, I'd love for you to call in 1-800-684-3110, 1-800-684-3110. Do you think we're going to see a pivot away from her support of Israel as we head closer and closer to the general election, Will, because that seems to be one of the sticking points in some of these swing states?
That's right. And there was a scoop that Axios got this morning from the Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin. She's running for the Senate seat in Michigan in this election season as well. And apparently, according to her internal polling, which the internal polling is a lot of times a lot more accurate to say, or at least that's the actionable polling that they make their campaign decisions off of, is that her internal polling, she warned her donors, showed that Vice President Kamala Harris is underwater in Michigan, meaning she's losing to President Donald Trump, no matter what the public-facing opinion polls that are coming out show. So if she is losing in Michigan, and you have a very forceful statements coming out from people like Rashida Tlaib, who are essentially saying your policies right now are furthering genocide, a genocidal campaign by Netanyahu. We also know this morning that the Israeli officials told Washington to expect an imminent ground operation in Lebanon, that they will be actually going within Lebanon, trying to clean out some of these strongholds of Hezbollah in the south of Lebanon. I think what you have to take a look at in the geopolitics of it all is that Israel is having to look at the election day as a potential turning point for them, that they know that Harris as president would be a lot worse for them, and they can't just sit there when they have genocidal maniacs surrounding them and say, we'll wait and see what happens. They have a ticking clock that a lot of these operations, it seems, they're like, let's go ahead and get these things done now, because we can't just leave our fate up to the U.S. election. And when you have congresswomen who have a lot of influence in a state that is pivotal for both campaigns to win, directly calling for an arms embargo against Israel from the Biden-Harris administration. You have to think that calculus is in Israel's mind as they are making these plays. But it also raises the question that you asked the callers. If she's underwater in Michigan and thinks that the voting bloc she may be missing is the constituency of Rashida Tlaib, does she come out after a small ground invasion into Lebanon and call for an arms embargo? Does she come out with some very strong condemnation of Israel that she thinks could get those votes back? We know that she's already decided a border wall is a good thing to try to get Arizona and Nevada and states that she's struggling in. Yes. Does she cherry pick another policy position to try to win a state like Michigan? I think odds are you could see something like that if she's really concerned about losing that state.
Yeah, I think it could happen in a way that's creatively done. Do I think she'll go full bore? I'm not sure, but I think that they will creatively show that they are not going to stand with Israel in the way even President Biden has stood with Israel, which, again, is not that strong, but it's stronger than maybe a lot of Democrats would want. Certainly would show that it would be a different policy than under a President Trump administration. Give us a call. I want your thoughts on this. 1-800-684-3110, 1-800-684-3110 to be on the air today. I'd love to hear from you. We got about 4 lines open, so this is a great time to call in. But let's go ahead and start one off. Let's go to Michael, who's calling in Florida on line 1. Listening on the radio. Michael, you're on the air.
Gentlemen, my question to this administration is, what's your definition of an ally? Because we certainly, to me, it means that we've got your back. We may not necessarily put boots on the ground unless we're genuinely asked, but we've got your back. And right now, to me, Israel and Israel alone is leading the fight against terrorism for the world.
Yeah, Michael, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, yes, Israel may be the only true free country in the Middle East. I would say that, where there are freedoms and liberties like we have American style. It's not exactly the same, but Western style feelings there. Western style beliefs there, where everyone should be able to live how they want to live. True freedom. But of course, it should be that we are there to support them however we need to be to support them. Now, right now, they've got a strong military. They don't need us there. But it does feel like they are concerned with the fact that we may not be there for them, specifically if we end up with a President Harris.
That's right. And I think that that's the main reason you're seeing such a forceful push right here during the month of September by the Israeli military. And we have seen them take bold moves throughout this year, whether it be what is credited to them of taking out the leader of Hamas while he was in Tehran visiting for the new president's inauguration, or whether it be the pager attack, which has not been claimed responsibility by Israel. But when you look at these actions that have decimated the leadership of these organizations that for a long time were almost untouchable. They had built such layers of security around themselves that it was very hard to get to. Even the bunker that Nasrallah was in the middle of Beirut was 60 feet underground. And it was a creative bombing technique where they did a chain reaction of bombing one after the other, so it would get further down to finally take him out in this bunker 60 feet underground. This isn't just fly over, drop one bomb, and walk away. They are having to use advanced military tactics, things that we haven't seen in much of modern warfare, the way they are carrying this out and decimating the leadership of these existential threats to Israel.
Yeah, absolutely. As we head into the second half hour, some of you lose us on your local radio stations. You can join us live each and every day from noon to 1, streaming on aclj.org, on YouTube, on Rumble. However you find your content, we're there. Later on, you can get the podcast as well. So make sure that you find us and you watch the full hour. We do full video. So if you're just listening, we do full video, television style production. And I did want to encourage everyone as we head off the air on some of these markets, specifically a lot of the Christian stations, our faith-based stations, to consider supporting the work of the ACLJ, because today a percentage of all proceeds will go to support hurricane relief in North Carolina and in Tennessee, our home state of Tennessee, our neighboring state of North Carolina, which I've spent a lot of time in, specifically in that area in Western North Carolina. So our prayers are with them, of course, with everybody. We hope people get out safe, but we do want to encourage you right now to get involved. And we didn't want to spend a day without being able to do that ourselves, to get ourselves involved. So we'll go to aclj.org/relief, or just any donation to aclj.org will support hurricane relief. Again, we're in contact with the governor's office here in Tennessee, as well in North Carolina. We'll be right back.
Israel is under attack. And every day I see ordinary Israelis acting as champions. Not to win medals or glory, but literally fighting for their very right to live, to exist. Being a champion means choosing to do what's right, to do what's hard, no matter the cost. Here in Israel, it can be a dangerous stand to take, but it's essential if the Jewish state is going to survive. As an ACLJ member, you have an opportunity to be a champion too. You can make a difference. You can impact real change and defend life, liberty, religious freedom. While the media and the misinformed march in support of terrorists, even in America, you can stand strong for Israel. By becoming a monthly donor, you can become a champion of life, a champion of liberty, a champion of freedom, a champion for Israel. Become an ACLJ champion. Go to aclj.org champions now.
Keeping you informed and engaged, now more than ever. This is Sekulow. And now your host, Logan Sekulow.
Welcome back to Sekulow. This is Logan Sekulow. Will Haynes joining me in studio as well, executive producer of this broadcast. We've got a packed second half hour coming up. Next segment, we're going to be joined by Jeff Balaban, head of ACLJ Jerusalem. Obviously, we're talking about the ongoing events happening in the Middle East, where Israel is really, this moment, this weekend, maybe the most, maybe the biggest moments to happen in this entire conflict happened over the weekend, taking out the head of Hezbollah, multiple heads of Hezbollah, and also continuing now their limited ground invasion. Looks like it's about to happen. This is a powerful moment. We need to stay tuned to what's happening. You need to stay vigilant to what's happening. Israel has kind of taken it to the point where, like I said, there's no turning back now. There's no turning back to what's going on because they have really taken it to the dictators, the terrorists, those that have been enslaving essentially their own people and murdering them for decades, people that want Israel wiped off the map. We are finally seeing the response that maybe has been needed, like I said, for the last few decades. And it's unfortunate that it had to come to this, but there is a point where you get pushed over the line, and about a year ago that happened. About a year ago, thousands of innocent civilians were murdered for no reason. Not during a time of extreme war, not during a time of crisis, just purely to cause chaos and to murder thousands. And of course, though it seems like that's been forgotten and we've started justifying it as we head into the Jewish High Holy Days, I want to hear from you at 1-800-684-3110. How do you feel about America's response to this? Because we've seen the response from the Lebanese, from the Syrians, from a lot of the Arab world living in the UK, who were out in front of the Israeli parliament or Israeli embassy, thanking, praying for, supporting Israel, because they know that Israel is doing the right thing and taking out a lot of these horrible leaders who have been plaguing that area of the world for decades and decades. But of course, the United States have people like Rashida Tlaib who come out, saying, how dare they? How dare even the Biden-Harris administration support the continuing allowed efforts from the Netanyahu group? We can't even imagine what she's going to say if Donald Trump is elected. I want to hear from you, though. What do you think about America's response? What do you think America's response should be to our allies in Israel? Phone lines are open for you. 1-800-684-3110. 1-800-684-3110. Will, also, though, we can't lose fact of what's going on in our own country. I think we have to always maintain that America, when there is big tragedy, when things are happening, that we are there to support. So right now, the ACLJ, we're supporting hurricane relief today. A portion of all donations made, aclj.org, because it's not just impact a small area of the country. It's obviously impacting the entire country. So support hurricane relief right now, because, Will, we are here in the state of Tennessee. We are here in the Nashville area. It has been our home for many years now. For me, for 20 years, the state of Tennessee. Majority of my life, I have been here at this point. And we have to make sure that when called upon, we do stand up.
That's right. And if you've seen the imagery of what took place in western North Carolina and East Tennessee, it's horrific. I don't know that I've seen such widespread devastation. It takes you back to the imagery you saw when Katrina hit New Orleans, but it seems like it is hitting a much wider area because of the multiple states involved. It's starting on the Gulf Coast of Florida. It wreaked havoc on Tampa and moved straight through the southeast, through Georgia. Atlanta was underwater, Tennessee, and North Carolina. It's devastating and heartbreaking. And those people, they need help.
Yeah, because those areas of the country do not expect this ever to happen. You don't expect a hurricane to affect the Smoky Mountain area of Tennessee and North Carolina. But it's what's happened. Phone lines are open for you at 1-800-684-3110. Jeff Balabon's going to be joining us, head of ACLJ Jerusalem, in the next segment, and then we're going to take all the calls we can, and some phone lines are filling up. We want to keep hearing from you. Again, 1-800-684-3110 to support the work of the ACLJ, and by doing so, you're supporting hurricane relief for today. So do that right now at aclj.org/relief, and be a good citizen. Be out there and support the work. We'll be right back with Jeff Balabon.
We start with the ongoing tensions in the Middle East, 24 hours since the announcement of the death of the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. Fears remain that Nasrallah's killing could spark an all-out regional war. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu described the attack as an historic turning point.
How does this affect the ability of this militant group to respond?
What we're witnessing is the most stunning Israeli military success since the 1967 Six-Day War. They have flipped the script entirely on Hezbollah in a matter of days. And Hezbollah is reeling, as we've seen now for the past 10 plus days, from the pager attacks, which decimated their internal communications, to now devastating assassination of Hassan Nasrallah and his top lieutenants. Hezbollah right now is lost in the wilderness, and Israel is taking advantage.
Here, soldiers in northern Israel look poised to expand an offensive against the region's biggest paramilitary force, Hezbollah, in Lebanon. They've already killed its leader and devastated its ranks, while also striking Hamas in Gaza.
Our enemies and our friends return to see Israel as it is, a strong, determined, powerful country. But I tell you, citizens of Israel, these are also challenging days. Because even in these days, we should not forget that we are in the midst of a difficult war, the cost of which are heavy.
If Israel was to go in to southern Lebanon as well, what would it do? Its aim would be to push Hezbollah away from the border, to make it keep to the UN Security Council resolution that ended the 2006 war. That means making sure that Hezbollah is to the north of the Litani River. So would Israel go and try to occupy that big area in the south of Lebanon up to the river, or would it go for a smaller scale operation closer to the border?
Welcome back to Sekulow. In the next segment, we are going to be taking as many calls as we can at 1-800-684-3110. And as we've been stating throughout this broadcast, a percentage of all proceeds today raised through the ACLJ website will be donated. A portion of those will be donated to hurricane relief throughout the country as needed, but specifically here in our home state of Tennessee and in western parts of North Carolina. We're going to make sure that that financial resources get into the right hands. So support the work by doing that. Jeff Balabon is joining us, head of ACLJ Jerusalem. Jeff, obviously it was a historic weekend. The fight against Hezbollah, the fight against terror, really in the world. And it should have been a weekend of almost celebration. And it was for a lot of people, as we saw Nasrallah taken out and then other leaders from Hezbollah, people who have been plaguing that region of the world for decades. But of course, we have statements coming out of places like the New York Times in his essentially obituary saying, over his 32 years leading the organization, he built Hezbollah into a domestic political force, one of the most heavily armed non-state force in the world. Mr. Nasrallah was opposed to Israel, which he called the Zionist entity, but maintained there should be one Palestine with equality for Muslims, Jews, and Christians. Is that how you remember him, Jeff? And what do you think about these kind of statements? Because I feel like this isn't even the reaction around the world. We are seeing people in the streets celebrating. We are seeing these moments happen, but our own country, at some reason, the New York Times and these kind of places have to come out with these kind of statements.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it makes me want to see an obituary for the New York Times. That publication has turned so foul. Evil is good and good is evil. Nasrallah was a purely evil person. Nasrallah spent his life dedicated to one thing and one thing only, the genocide of the Jews. In the process of that, he trampled the Christian Lebanon into obliteration, essentially, a country that was once the most beautiful place on the Mediterranean, a magnificent country where all faiths lived together in peace. And they came in there as Iranian proxies, and they destroyed life, made it miserable for everybody. And he spent his life dedicated to pure evil. And here comes the New York Times trying to find some way to praise him. Again, the New York Times has been consistent in their campaign of incitement against the existence of not just Israel, but also against Jews. Even in America, the New York Times is known for hiding news about violent anti-Semitism, for praising those who are the enemies of the Jews. It's a terrible publication. The bigger issue, which you and Will talked about before, and I was watching, this is a celebration, as you say, around the Middle East. This is from Syria to Lebanon to Iran. Those who want to see peace, those who want to see freedom, are celebrating the destruction of this evil, evil man who actually was directly responsible and has been part of an organization that has been a terrorist faction that has destroyed countless lives in the region and many, many American lives, American servicemen's families. They've just obliterated them. Thank God that he's been taken out.
Jeff, when you look at the reaction of both people like Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib and the New York Times, it makes you wonder, even if they understand the even base level theology of Shia Islam, when they print something like he wanted one Palestine with equality for Muslim, Jews, and Christians, it's a laughable statement, but it's unfortunate because many people will read that and take away that, oh, he was a freedom fighter. He was someone who wanted equity. The only equality he wanted for Muslim, Jews, and Christians would have been Sunni Muslims, Jews, and Christians under his subjugation.
That's an important point also, because there are already 20 plus million Arab Muslim refugees from the Middle East because of decades of war between Sunni and Shia Muslim factions. And that's the balance of power in which the current American administration, and therefore progressives, and therefore the New York Times, has embraced the idea of strengthening the Shia portion of that. Well, this war, which really the Jews and Israel should have no part of, and the Christians in Lebanon, and the Maronites, and the Alawites, and the Kurds, and the non-Christian but non-Muslim factions around the Middle East, really they're all kept hostage to this terrible fight between these two Muslim factions. And Israel is actually the solution, where one indigenous minority faith and minority people have their own country. And as you pointed out again, until October 7th of this past year, there was tension, there was ongoing terror, ongoing war. And the truth is the war has never stopped. You had a caller earlier who said this. This war has not stopped since the founding of the modern state of Israel against the existence of Israel. Well, it just passed every boundary. And that, combined with Israel seeing that where America is going, where the Democratic Party is going, where the leadership on the left is going, knows that they have no choice but finally to wage this war. And let me say this. While around the Jewish world, there was celebration over the taking out of this terrible, evil man, this murderer, this mass murderer, there's still a tremendous sense of fear or tension in Israel, because it's understood now that Israel is going to war, most likely, a war that it has not seen in decades, if ever, against an army that has been built up for decades, that is much, much more powerful than Hamas was, and is a regular military. But there is no choice, because obviously a Harris administration would not support Israel. And frankly, it makes sense to start it now, because even in a Trump administration, I don't think that Trump wants to see new wars, but he does. If he inherits a war, he'll want to see it dealt with quickly. So really, Israel has this moment now where it must wage all-out war to decapitate, not just, well, actually more than that, they already decapitated Hezbollah, but to take out its weaponry and its soldiers.
Well, yeah, when you see the statements coming out calling for ceasefires and those kind of things, at this point, I feel like the gloves are off. You got to move forward. It's too late in some ways. Not that the war we shouldn't figure out a way for it to end at some point, but for Israel's point of view, they have gone this far. It's time to kind of finish the job, if you will. And I feel like the Netanyahu administration feels like that it is their goal and is their calling to maybe finally do that, to do what's been needed to be done for decades.
Yeah, and look, I again, because of the role we play and because they recognize our presence in Washington and elsewhere, there is some communication about plans and about what and timing. And so in conferences and conversations recently, that's been the role which I've been playing, and on behalf of ACLJ is explaining what the situation here is in America politically, how that might impact what they're doing. But it's important for Americans to also understand why this decision has been delayed for so long, because we don't understand it. So let me very briefly explain that because Israel is a parliamentary coalition government, in America, we see this. An administration can do what it wants for 2.5, maybe 3 years before an election. Even a lame duck administration wants to see its party continue. So it worries about it the last year and a half at most. In Israel, because of the coalition system, any government can be toppled overnight if it takes an unpopular stance. So to launch an unpopular war, even if it's necessary and defensive, I think it's been pushed off, this is my view. It's been pushed off for decades, precisely because without an immediate dire need, a coalition will be toppled by putting so many soldiers in harm's way. But now people are seeing it's necessary. And so, yes, this is the time, this is the government. And I would say that there is, with whatever fear and anxiety over what this means in terms of loss of life of their own children, their own husbands, their own fathers, I think that they recognize that it must happen now because what's happening up north is intolerable, cannot last. And at this moment, there is enough righteous anger and common sense for 80+% of the Israeli populace.
And Jeff, you brought up righteous anger. I think that was an appropriate term. And this is an image that you have sent me and we've discussed offline, but it's a very powerful image about the Kafir Brigade before they entered Gaza. And I think there's not a more stark difference between the terrorist entities and the IDF than this image. But could you talk about it a little bit for our audience, those that are watching?
Thanks for sharing this image. This image, I don't know who took the picture. It just went around on social media. As you say, it's the Kafir Brigade. It's the youngest, it's the newest infantry and the largest infantry brigade. Usually it's in what's called the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria, and it was called into Gaza. And this is the soldiers blessing each other. And to me, it's so beautiful. And it made me think of a line that my late rabbi said years ago in another war, when the world was yelling at Israel for a fictitious massacre, did never happen, where Israel sent in its own troops, risked their own lives, lost lives to save as many non-combatant Arabs as they could. And yet the world called it a massacre. And he said, well, this is the difference. Israel's not doing this for public opinion. They're doing it because they love life. They love anybody's life, even their enemies. And they're trying to protect it. And his line was, this is the difference between people who wage a holy war and a holy people waging war. And that's what I see when I see that picture. They're going into battle with love and understanding that their victory depends on God, and that depends on their unity, and they're loving each other. And that is a beautiful image to me. And, we're about to go into Rosh Hashanah, the high holidays, where Jews believe the entire world is being judged. That's what we believe. The entire world is being judged. And it's a period, it's very solemn, and it's a period of great awe. And it ends in a period of great joy. And the most joyous day was the day last year that Hamas chose, or the Palestinians chose, to sweep through Israel and create such destruction. And I just want to say, so this has now come full around to the new year. And I want to go into this time of year really with their blessing. That the blessing of these soldiers who are risking their lives, who'd rather be sitting and studying the Torah or taking care of their families, just leading peaceful lives and doing good for the world, that they're giving their lives up. They're risking their lives for each other and for every value that we, even as Americans, and that Christians in America believe in. And I want their blessings on us. And Jeff, I believe work the ACLJ does.
Yes, Jeff, thank you so much for your impassioned response there. We know we appreciate it. We're all praying for everyone over at ACLJ Jerusalem, and our entire team supports the efforts there. Again, support the work of the ACLJ at aclj.org. We're going to be right back with your phone calls at 1-800-684-3110. We'll be right back.
The devastation from Helene spread across the South.
Yes, North Carolina was hit with flooding it hasn't seen in a century, some calling it biblical. This is the scene in Asheville, which is now isolated after roads leading into the town flooded and cell towers were knocked down in the storm.
Well, you can see the aftermath now, which is just mud crusted everywhere, from the streets, sidewalks, to the plants in front of me. Even further down this street, which is blocked off from police, you could see on the buildings just how high the water level came. I spoke to one jewelry shop owner yesterday, and she says they couldn't get their door open, but when they looked inside their window, they could see all of their jewelry, all of their shelves, even up to the stairs, completely smothered in mud.
This is not just Asheville. This is North Carolina, western North Carolina, a huge area that spans probably about 11,750 square miles at this point. Millions of people. That's an area the size of Massachusetts. It's surrounding states like Tennessee. and Atlanta.
The historic storm dumping as much as 30 inches of rain in parts of the Carolina mountains. Nearly a dozen landslides reported.
I don't think anyone was prepared for it. I don't think anyone thought it would be this bad.
Roads and bridges washed away. As of Saturday, the state DOT shutting down more than 400 roads. Countless residents stranded. Crews and neighbors going door to door to help the most vulnerable.
It's like a bomb went off. They don't have homes. They don't have oxygen. They don't have water.
This is an unprecedented tragedy that requires an unprecedented response.
In Asheville, many residents growing desperate. Cell service and potable water out for days.
This is apocalyptic, not just for Canton, but the entire region.
Now, most of this area is still in a state of emergency. We do know that as of right now, the county says about 1,000 people are still unaccounted for, and they're still doing life-saving missions every single day, even days after Helene has passed on.
Welcome back to Sekulow. Again, any support of the ACLJ today, a portion of that is going to go to support hurricane relief. So I encourage you to do that, aclj.org. We're in contact with our home state of Tennessee in the governor's office here, as well as some great organizations in North Carolina. We'll make sure that that percentage of the funds that's raised today goes to the right people that you could trust. So again, I encourage you, go to aclj.org/relief or scan the QR code, or any donation made today. A portion of that will be donated. So we appreciate that. We're going to go ahead and start with some phone calls. A lot of you have called in about the situation in Israel. If you want to talk about that, if you want to talk about the destruction happening in the hurricane areas, we encourage you to call in. We have got 3 lines open right now, and I'd like to take as many calls as we can in this last segment. You just heard from an impassioned plea from our friend Jeff Balaban and the head of ACLJ Jerusalem. So I want to get your thoughts on that as well. 1-800-684-3110. Let's kick it off. Let's go to Eugene, who's calling first in California, who's an ACLJ champion. And if you want to become an ACLJ champion, that's people that support the ACLJ on an ongoing, recurring basis. So people that automatically recur. And if you say you're a champion, let us know you're a champion, you get bumped up when you call in. So nice little perk of being an ACLJ champion. I appreciate your support, Eugene. But I know you got some comments. Go ahead.
Yes. I'm a supporter of ACLJ, and I really appreciate everything y'all are doing. I can't thank you enough. But my second comment is, if the squad in our Congress are making these accusations, they love these countries more than they actually love the United States. I suggest we put them on a plane and send them back to these countries and let them find out if they really love these countries like they say they do.
Yeah, Eugene, I think there is a general thought of, you see a lot of these protests on the streets, and if you have any knowledge of what goes on in the Middle East and the way they treat human rights, you would think that the right side is pretty easy to identify, and that Israel being the right side of this war is easy to identify, because you are talking about governments that are killing and murdering people for having different beliefs. That simply is that, for being Christians, for being atheists, for not even just for their religious beliefs, but their personal beliefs, their personal views, the way they conduct their lives. It could not be a less free area of the world. But for some reason, our college students, our American people have decided that, or a certain portion, a loud portion, I wouldn't even say it's the majority, a loud portion of the American people have decided that they are going to throw their support behind ruthless dictators, ruthless murderers.
Well, and all you have to do is look at the history of some of these countries and see the prosperity and economies that many of these countries had prior to being taken over by radical jihadis. And if you were to look at the real estate of Gaza, it should be prosperous and a resort economy right there on the Mediterranean. But instead, Hamas, as the leadership there, turned it into a third world strip of land. I always said third world country, but it's not. It's a third world strip of land on the Mediterranean where they steal all the aid to build terror tunnels and to wage war against Israel. The same with Lebanon. It was a prosperous Christian nation from the historic standpoint. They called Beirut the Paris of the Middle East, or the Paris of the Mediterranean. And then Hezbollah, as an Iranian proxy, devastated what is modern-day Lebanon. And the same with Iran. The Persian people, very proud, genius-level people, with their advancements in the science and technology taken over by a theocratic dictatorship with the Ayatollahs, and it's turned into just a machine that is trying to find ways to kill Western ideology and Jews. That's all they want to do. And so when you take a look at it from a standpoint of an American or anyone in the world, you should look at these nations and be like, what they could have been, but what they have become because of their hatred of Israel and their hatred of all things Western. It's a shame, and they could be so much more, and that should be a push to liberate these people, not to let them live in the squalor that is brought on by their dictatorships.
And I think you got to be careful in your own country as well. You can see how quickly some of these thriving nations can turn. So, we're a very young nation compared to a lot of these. So you need to make sure that we are on the right side as well. Let's continue taking calls. We got Nick in Texas. You're on the air.
Yes, I would echo everything that the last man just said. I'm here in Austin where there's the hotbed of liberals and ignorant thinking, supposedly college-educated people that cannot see for the life of them what is really going on over there. It just amazes me. Israel was attacked and thousands slaughtered, and they think that they have no right to defend themselves and try to stamp out this evil.
Yeah, Nick, it is that, issue where the Jewish people are judged differently than any other people around the world. And Israel is judged differently than any other country around the world. It's just the truth. And I'm sorry that I know that offends some people, but it's sadly the case. It doesn't matter. There's a good book out specifically about this called Jews Don't Matter, because in these situations, this is what happens. The Jewish people are thrown under the bus and said that they're the problem, when they're the ones who are the only place in the entire Middle East where Western laws, Western thought is pervasive, where when they take military action, they actually try to limit as much as possible what casualties happen in terms of people who are non-military or children or families. Unfortunately, in some of these areas, it's going to happen, just like it would happen for us if we were to go to war. But for Israel and for the Jewish people, sadly, it just isn't the case. They're not given the same amount of support and grace that other nations are. Let's go to Mike in New Jersey. Mike in New Jersey, last call of the day. You're on the air.
Yes. I just wish that those Jews would cooperate by either converting to Islam or marching themselves into the sea and putting an end to this problem. It's absolutely, you're absolutely 1,000% correct that the standard for the Jewish people who by defending themselves are also defending the right to be agnostic or atheist or anything else. Right. Anyone who doesn't support what Israel is doing is completely demonically deceived. Yeah. Or
they're blind. Yeah, Mike, they are blind to really what's happening. And we can't let that overshadow what's happening in the world and pretend it's not happening or act like for some reason we know what's best or what's the best situation. And no one wants war. No one wants to see people get hurt, especially innocent people get hurt. But for once and for all, maybe it's time to end this and for Israel to do what they need to do so there can be actual freedom in the Middle East. I don't know if it will happen in our lifetime. I sure hope it will, but we'll see. Hey, I wanted to take another minute again to not only say that our prayers are with the people of the hurricane damaged areas, whether that's in Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and our home state of Tennessee, but currently right now we are doing some localized support for the state of Tennessee as well as western parts of North Carolina, and I'm sure others as well. So all donations today, a portion of all donations, will be allocated to support hurricane relief. We've seen just unbelievable damage in our home state of Tennessee and our neighboring states in North Carolina and Georgia. So again, support the work of the ACLJ, and by doing so today, not only do you support the incredible work we're doing here, ACLJ Jerusalem, ACLJ here in America, our incredible team, our media team, you're also supporting humanitarian relief for the hurricane. Do that right now at aclj.org.